Hi everyone, welcome to tonight's Lean-In session. I'm Jessica Owen, the EmAGN Queensland co-chair and your host for this evening. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the First Nations people as the traditional owners of the land that I am hosting from today, EmAGN, Brisbane. I recognise the country north and south of the Brisbane River as the home of the Turrbal and Jagera nations. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which you all join from today and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in this session. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging and celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal peoples and their ongoing cultures. Tonight's Lean-In session is brought to you by EmAGN, the Emerging Architects and Graduates Network, and SONA, the Student Organised Network for Architecture, with the support of the Australian Institute of Architects. I'm so excited to be hosting this Lean-In session tonight. This is the Lean-In session that I needed when I began my first architecture job, and I hope it can help many early career architects as you launch off and get further into your professional lives. For me, the most powerful way to deal with the feelings of doubt and uncertainty has been to talk with my peers about it. And when I realized that I was not the only one feeling like this, and that other very, very accomplished people around me were also struggling with the same feelings of self-doubt, that helped a lot. That realization didn't make the feeling go away, but it did make me feel less alone. So for everyone who has joined tonight, it might help you to know that this has proved a very popular Lean-In session. And especially tonight, you are not alone in the feeling that you don't know what you're doing. I'm going to give a little bit of context from my personal experience and why I think this is a valuable session. And then we're going to hear from Hugh Kearns. And at the end of Hugh's presentation, we'll have a Q&A session with questions that were submitted at registration and that can be submitted via the chat at the end of the session. So please do get involved. So when I began my first job after graduating from my master's, I was very excited to be jumping into the professional world and actually doing some architecture. But after a few months, I was overwhelmed every day by the amount I didn't know. It felt like I would never know enough and I couldn't do enough. Sometimes it was paralyzing. And when I tried to be proactive and help myself by articulating this concern to experienced architects around me, they would say things like, yeah, that never goes away, or just get used to it. And those were people who I considered my mentors, who I hoped respected and would support me. And those reactions left me thinking, I don't want that for the rest of my professional life, and maybe I'm just not cut out for this. I feel like part of the problem is there's a bit of a culture in architecture of valuing perfectionism while also faking it till you make it, neither of which really suit the way I operate. Over the last few years, I've come to think of myself as a bit more of a job well done person than a perfectionist, and my style is a bit more get help when you need it than fake it till you make it. Although I have spent a fair bit of time not asking questions because I felt like I should know the answer and whoever I ask will think I'm stupid. With all that said, there is good news. I'm still here. And in the last few years, I've gained professional experience, which has afforded me a bit of important perspective. I have spent a lot of time in that uncomfortable, overwhelmed place of confusion. But it's much better now, and that's in part because I have just gotten used to it. I'm much more comfortable not knowing the answers and accepting that I'm going to have to figure it out. And if I don't know how to figure it out, I have to figure that out first. Most weeks I learn something that will help me find the answers I need, even if it's just a new, very specific phrase to punch into Google to help me find the useful specification detail more quickly and accurately. It's also gotten better because that uncomfortable feeling has gone away a little bit. I just know more than I did before. I spent a few years learning, and now when people ask me questions, sometimes I just know the answer. So it's quantifiable improvement. I've also spent a bit of time working with very smart, very accomplished people who, when they're asked something they don't know the answer to, they just say, I don't know, in a voice that indicates the person who asked might be the foolish one. I'm not quite at that stage yet, and I'm not necessarily advocating for it, but it's good to know it's an option. Given this has been one of the most registered Lean-In sessions, it's safe to say the feeling of imposter syndrome resonates with a lot of people. To help us navigate these feelings of self-doubt and share what the latest psychological research tells us about imposter syndrome and how it operates, I'm pleased to welcome our speaker for tonight, Hugh Kearns. Hugh is recognised internationally as a public speaker, educator and researcher. He regularly lectures at universities across the world and has recently returned from lecture tours of the UK and US, which includes lectures at Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard, Berkeley and Stanford. His areas of expertise include self-management, positive psychology, work-life balance, learning and creativity. He draws on over 25 years of experience as a leading training and development professional within the corporate, financial, education and health sectors in Ireland, Scotland, North America, New Zealand and Australia. He has coached individuals, teams and executives in a wide range of organisations in the public and private sectors. Hugh lectures and researches at Flinders University, Adelaide, Australia. He is widely recognised for his ability to take the latest research in psychology and education and apply it to high-performing people and groups. As co-author with Maria Gardner, he has published 10 books which are in high demand both in Australia and internationally. Welcome, Hugh.
Excellent, very good. I think I might update that introduction you've just given because it said recently returned from the UK and the US. I don't think anybody's recently returned from the UK or US. That's a little bit out of date these days. All right, so look, welcome along. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself and then we'll talk about this wonderful topic, the imposter syndrome. And so a little bit about it to start with, about me. If I were there in person, that's what I would look like, but we don't do things in person these days. We have to do everything virtually, but that's the good thing. We can do this across time zones and other places, so that's me. I can't be in person with you because this is a map of Australia showing all the Aboriginal language groupings across the country. And I'm down here in Adelaide, and I have a few jobs down here. One is at a university called Flinders University, doing some lecturing and researching. And my area of interest in research is the idea of self-management, how people manage themselves. And in particular, I'm interested in why people don't manage themselves. That's things like overcommitment, distraction, perfectionism, procrastination. And one of the things that often underlies many of those things are these doubts and fears associated with the imposter syndrome. So that's why it becomes relevant to that topic a lot. Most of my time, though, is not at the university at all these days. It's running a small business called Thinkwell and running workshops like this and talking to people all around Australia, all around the world these days about how to be more effective. And if you want to find out more about our work, there's a website called ithinkwell.com.au, and there are lots of resources and materials on that website you can download for free that are useful in terms of managing yourself. On that website, we have a bookshop, and there's a book there called The Impostor Syndrome, and a lot of things I'll talk about this afternoon or this evening are in that book as well. If you want to find out more about this topic, I have a website called impostersyndrome.com.au, and there are lots of resources on there that you can find. There's a questionnaire, a free guide, other material. It's a useful place for you to find out about it, or also if you want to help other people or friends just to find out more about it. So that's the web address, and I've put it into the chat function as well. So that's a bit about those. If you're listening carefully so far, you'll think it's not a very Adelaide-sounding accent. And that's right, because I'm from a place called Sligo, and Sligo is over there on the west coast of Ireland. And my degree, a long time ago now, was at University College Dublin in agricultural science. And then moved out of science into education for a while, and then probably for the last 25 years or so into psychology. But in particular, psychology of high performers. That's people like you and others and so forth. So, and you'll see a bit of that as we go through. So that's a bit about me. Now, it's always nice to know a little bit about you. There's 130 of you out there, but it's good to know who's at the other side. So what we're going to do, again, if we were in a room together, I'd get you to shake hands and say hello to people, but we can't do that these days. But we can do that virtually. So what I'm going to do is get you to tell me your name and where you are. And that could be what town or place or city you're in, but also are you at home or at work or sitting in front of the lounge or still in the bed, or where are you? So I'm going to get you to use the chat function, if you can find that. So type in your name and where you are, town and place. Where are you right now? So let's see who's here. So find the chat function and type in. Paolo is in Southern Highlands, New South Wales. Anthony in Macedon, Victoria. Penny in the Sunshine Coast. Genevieve in Brisbane. Steph in Melbourne in the living room. Brooke is in Brisbane. Everybody in Melbourne is probably in the living room, I would say. Grace in Brisbane, and Richard is in Abbotsford in Victoria, Miguel in Sydney, Susan in Adelaide here with me. Louis is in Sydney, Badru is in Melbourne as well. Louise in Perth, a couple of hours behind us. Jocelyn is in Brisbane. Rebecca at your desk at home in Melbourne. Abigail is in Perth. People all over the place. Barbie in the Sunshine Coast. David is in Sydney. Zoe in Brisbane. Matteo in Sydney. Katie in Brisbane as well. Anna is in Hobart. Welcome to you. Grant in Melbourne, Mizan in Melbourne, Carlo in Perth in the bedroom, hopefully awake and paying attention. Shanti's in Melbourne in the mezzanine home office. Julie's in France. Oh, yes, 10 o'clock in the morning over there to you. Good morning to you. Aida's in Sydney. Samantha is in Melbourne at home. Renette is in Western Australia. Holly is in Brisbane. I'll just scroll down because we don't have time to go through everybody. Someone else in Adelaide, Hugh, another Hugh in Adelaide in the office. I'll scroll down to the end. Terry is in Brisbane at the gym, hopefully paying attention as well. And Rebecca in Melbourne in the home office. All right, so the reason I go through that is just to welcome you along and to say hello, because in these virtual times, sometimes you don't see people very often, very much, and it's good to know that there are many other people. There's 136 of us here at the moment, all tuning in from various places. So welcome along to that. So now I'm going to explain. I'll use the chat function again a bit later on, so feel free to type in as we go along. And I'm going to talk for about maybe half an hour or so, and then there'll be questions at the end. We can interact, and you can go through that. So let's talk about this imposter syndrome thing. What is it? Where does it come from? And I've been studying it for the last 20 or 25 years or so. It's a really fascinating topic. I really like it. It explains a lot of sort of human behavior. So we'll sort of describe it informally first, I suppose. And I describe it, it's that nagging feeling, you know, when you start a new job, when you're thinking, you know, you're sort of pleased, but also thinking, can I do it? Will I be able to do this? Or even in your existing job, you get a new assignment. You maybe get a different role, or you're asked to do something you hadn't done before. You think, can I do it? That nagging feeling, partly pleased to have it, but also a little bit worried about it as well. Certainly a great place to get public speaking, to get imposter syndrome, is when you do some public speaking. Because as I'm talking to you now, I'm thinking someone out there might know more than I do. You know, when you have to give a talk or go and present something, you're thinking maybe they're going to find out. So it explains a lot of that anxiety. Maybe they'll find out. But at least when you talk, the words disappear. But when you write things down, they have documentary evidence about how stupid you are. And there it is in black and white with your name on it. So whenever you have to write a report or write a paper or anything like that, often that brings up a lot of doubts and worries, and it brings the imposter syndrome. So it's probably that nagging feeling that we often have in situations like that. So as informally, I would describe it a feeling that you're going to be exposed, that they're going to pull back the curtains and they go, you're not really as good as you looked at all. Or take off that mask and suddenly they're going to find what you're really like. And when they do, they're not going to be very impressed. They're going to go, well, you looked quite confident, but now we know you're not able to do that at all. So it's that some people describe as a feeling naked. You're out there in public and people are looking at you with all your flaws and everything like that. So, and it's a really common thing. Most people have that at times. So now let's look at, I suppose, the history of it. And I suppose it's probably the first time it was really used in the literature or whatever was in 1978. And that was, there were two women at Georgia State University in the United States. And they were working with academics at the university, Pauline Clancy and Susan Ames. They were working with these senior women. And they noticed this strange thing. Here were all these senior women who would all say, I shouldn't be here. There's been some sort of mistake. And they do what all academics do when they notice something strange. They say, let's write a paper. So they wrote a paper called The Imposter Phenomenon in High Achieving Women, Dynamics and Therapeutic Intervention. Now, they didn't really do very much. The paper wasn't much about intervention at all. The paper was, they described this strange thing that they'd seen, the imposter phenomenon. So they published that paper, and then what happened was that paper became quite popular because a lot of people said, I feel like that too. And what they'd really done quite successfully is just put a name on something that a lot of people were feeling. Now, the early research around all this was that it was women, and that it was women in academia, because that was where they were looking, of course, and so it became popular at that time. And Pauline Clancy wrote a book about it called The Imposter Phenomenon, Overcoming the Fear That Haunts Success, and it became quite popular in the 80s, and the sort of words came up into the literature, and it changed over time from imposter phenomenon to imposter syndrome and a few other variations like that. So that's, I suppose, the history of it. It's not that long, really, but it's lasted forever, really. But people only had a name for it probably in the last 50 or 60 years. So the way I like to look at it, I like to split it up into two different parts. The first part are what I call imposter feelings. And then the other part is the imposter syndrome. And I'm going to describe the two different parts. I think it's useful to split it up a bit like that. So first of all, imposter feelings. So imposter feelings are you occasionally feel like a fraud. You feel like you don't fit in. I shouldn't be here. Even though there is evidence that you're not. And that's the crucial thing about it. You feel like it, but you're not a fraud. There's absolutely incontrovertible evidence, absolute evidence that you're not. You have qualifications, you have experience, got all those things, but you still feel like it, which is pretty weird. Because there are real imposters. These are people who claim things they can't do. But this is even weirder. You can do it, but you still feel like a fraud. So it's pretty weird. So that's the imposter feelings. Now, when you look at the research about this, about 70% of people who answer surveys would say they occasionally feel like a fraud or an imposter. Now, that number is really, really important because that's the majority. That's most of us. And there's a fair bet many of the other 30% are probably lying. Because I would argue it's a very normal thing as a human being to feel out of your depth occasionally, to wonder whether you can do stuff. So it's a fairly normal thing to feel occasionally like an imposter when you start a new role or a new job or something happens, to have that feeling. So as I said, it's very important because, as Jess was pointing out earlier, when people feel like an imposter, they think they are the only one in the whole world who feels like that. Because it's very secret, and so you don't know, and you think it's only me. Everybody else looks like all together. I'm just the only one. But no, 70% of people and more probably feel like that. So that's really important to understand. So, and you're thinking, but hang on, they don't look like imposters. But they're looking at you thinking, you don't look like an imposter either. So we don't have a big sign on our head saying imposter. We look like we got it together, but inside, most people are feeling like that. And you think about your colleagues, you look at your colleagues, more senior people, oh, they don't feel it. Well, I run workshops with these people and they do feel it. So it's really, really common. So that's quite important to know, that it's not just you, it's most people feel like that. And I would argue that's a fairly normal feeling when you're starting something new. So that's the imposter feelings. Now, I'm going to ask a question. We'll use the chat function for this again. Is, have you ever felt like a fraud? Start a new job or whatever like that. We have 140 people here. Maybe we have 140 people who never felt like an imposter. So I'm going to get you to type into chat, ever felt like a fraud or an imposter? So let's see. Yes. Jessica was first in. Yes. Yep. All the time. Lots of times. Lots of people there. Yeah, daily, says Edward. Yep, definitely. Yep, especially when applying for jobs, says Jesse. That's a common one. Yeah, occasionally, yes. Yeah, sometimes. Yeah, yep. And the reason you need to look at that list is, hang on, these are people just like you. They're going around doing good jobs, clever people doing all that stuff, but they feel it as well. So you shouldn't realize it's not just me telling you. Here are your colleagues, just like you, who say, yeah, definitely feel that. I often feel it. It's very common all the time. So first of all, that's to realize you don't have to be quiet about it. Everybody else is feeling the same thing as well. So it's not just you. So that's really important. And so that's the first one, is that it's really, really common. So as I said, that's 70% of people would feel like that occasionally. However, about 30% of people, these are different surveys, so it's not the same. It's not the same 30%. These are different people. 30% of people would say they consistently feel like it, and that means it's not just every now and again. This is a lot of the time, and that's when it becomes a little bit more difficult, because it's not just occasionally. It's all the time now, or a lot of the time, and that's when I would describe it as the imposter syndrome. The occasional feeling's okay, but if it's a lot of the time, it makes it a bit harder for you. And the way I would describe the imposter syndrome is it's a bunch of thoughts and feelings and behaviors, a bunch of stuff like that, is sort of a syndrome that result from the perception of having misrepresented yourself, despite evidence you haven't. Somehow I've made these people think I can do stuff, even though there's evidence I can, but I still feel like I haven't. And so but now it's a whole bunch of thoughts and feelings and behaviors. And the thoughts could be, I can't do this. I'm going to be found out. Who am I to be standing talking here to all these clever other people? I just got away with it this time. The next time they're going to find out. Even when you do something, oh, I just managed this time. Next time they're going to find out that thing. So the thoughts. The feelings are feeling like a fraud, feeling anxious, feeling on edge. The best way to describe it is, you know that feeling when you're driving down the motorway or the freeway and a police car comes along with the siren going, you think, what have I done wrong? And you're sort of really worried. And of course, they keep on going because it wasn't you at all. Or when someone senior says to you, we need to have a meeting, and your brain goes, oh, the feeling of feeling like a fraud being caught out. So that's the feelings. And the behaviors are either overworking, which means work 10 times harder than you need to so that they won't find out, or alternatively, avoid getting yourself into places where you could get found out. And so that's the imposter syndrome. So it's not just occasionally, this is a lot of the time. And that's when it can actually become quite debilitating. It can stop you doing things, taking risks, trying things out, applying for jobs or whatever, because you're constantly having that sort of feeling going around. So I'm going to give you a moment again. I'm going to have a chat about, have you ever felt like a fraud? And so examples could be maybe when you have to give a presentation in your work or anywhere really where you have to stand up and talk. If you had to give a lecture or when you have to talk to other people and give a talk like that, the first day of your job or when you start a new job or a new role. For some people, winning an award, you get praise or reward and they go, hang on, why did they pick me? For many people, when you go to an interview, if you're applying for a job, maybe I shouldn't even be applying. Or even just putting in an application for something, for an award or a job or anything like that are very common places. So once again, in the chat function, anybody ever felt like it? And when does it commonly feel, or examples of where you might have felt like a fraud? Let's see, a group interview for a job, yeah, absolutely, yeah, because you're thinking, I shouldn't be here with all these other people. Certainly giving a presentation, says Jessalyn, yeah. Applying for work, yeah, if you have to go out and actually ask for things, me, who am I to do this, yeah. Presentation, public speaking, says Chantal. Not even a special occasion, just day to day, yes, all the time, yeah. Meetings, yeah, meetings are very common because you have all these people, they're trying to pretend how brilliant they are and thinking, I'm not as good as all these, and so they're saying all these clever things, isn't it? Yeah, any sort of praises, because it's funny, isn't it? People have said how well you've done, and think, hang on, you shouldn't be doing that. No, this doesn't make sense. Yeah, so any praise, and ironically, the more praise you get, the worse it'll be. Yeah. Tutoring, yeah, when you're teaching other people, because maybe I'm just one page ahead of the students. Interviews and presentations for Ruth. When you take on a new role, Oscar, yeah, again, anytime you transition from one thing to another is a very, very common place. Yeah, very common there. In a meeting, Suzanne, Badru says, at work, especially talking to consultants or other professionals, yes, because they're all so clever and sound brilliant and whatever, and you think, I don't know everything. And especially people who have expertise in other areas where you don't, and you think they know all these wonderful terms. I'm stupid here. And you're not, but you just don't know their language, but you know yours, but it can make you feel like you don't know. Maybe if you're the only architect in a group with lots of other people who have their own expertise, you think, I'm not as clever as them. Yeah, presentation, leading projects. Yeah, that's a good one, Jacob. Yeah, someone says lead a project. Part of you is pleased, but the other thinking is, what if it doesn't go well? Now everyone's looking to you to do it, and maybe I can't do it. So, and in a lead position, people are watching now, and so they'll see the mistakes. Yeah, leading a team. Yeah, that's right. When you get promoted to a team, that's going to be a very common one. Other areas are if you're leading a team with more people more senior to you or older than you, I think they know more than I do. Jessica, meeting with people who are more experienced or confident than you. That's as just said there. Yeah, you have people who are been around for a long time, and you think I'm supposed to be now talking to these people. Jesse, in the job, talking to friends, applying for jobs, talking to consultants, Jessalyn. When people say I'm good at my job, yeah, ironically, here they are telling you're good, and yet that makes it worse because hang on, I don't know what I'm doing here. I must have fooled them. Presentation to stakeholders, Katie, yeah. Applying for work in the industry, yeah, all of the above. Scarlett says meeting interviews, new tasks, giving feedback to colleagues, yeah. When people say I've done well, it's ironic, isn't it? They think they're being nice to you, but it makes it worse. Susan, when I'm questioned by consultants, certainly when you get questioned, if you're at a meeting and then people raise problems, you think, oh, they've found out. A very common one for a lot of people is when you make a mistake. When something goes wrong, then you're going to go, suddenly it's all going to appear. Regular productivity. Carla, in my job, doing a new project that includes doing something or knowing something you've not done before. Yeah, when you do something for the first time, that it would be normal to cut out, but that's when you think this is the one where they're going to find out. Interviews and a new job. Daniel says, starting a task, exercise I've never done before. Sharing accolades on social, yes. Yeah. Meeting in a new job. Callie says, in the presence of people with 15 years experience more than you. Yeah, because ironically what happens there, Callie, is you compare yourself. Here's a new person with somebody who's 15 years experience. They know more than I do. Yeah, of course they do. But we think I should be as good as them. Hang on, they've had 15 years head start. Roseanne, presentations, interviews at work. Asking for promotion, yeah, that's a scary one, isn't it? Putting yourself forward because they go, hang on, you're not serious, are you? You couldn't be looking for promotion. You can barely do your job. And so that'll be really scary to put yourself out there. Today I joked to the consultant, don't worry, 2 half brains will make 1 whole. Yeah. And signing as an architect, yeah, putting your name on things, yeah, that's sometimes a scary thing. Or, if you ever end up putting your name on a brass plate on the wall or on the website, this is me, probably pretty scary. Sometimes another one will be when they ask you to write a biography for yourself, to introduce yourself, and that's a bit scary, having to say nice things about yourself. So what you can see is really common for a lot of people there. So I'll give you a few more examples of where this might arise. I like this ad I saw at the University of New South Wales a few years ago that said PhD researchers wanted, geniuses preferred. So who's going to apply for that? If you apply for that and then you turn up and say, where's the genius? And so automatically that's going to make you feel like you can't do it or you're not good at it. So that's a good way to make people feel it. So it's very common in areas where you're going to be evaluated, where you're measured in some way. So common areas are, as I said, initially thought it was just academics, but of course it's every part of life. So sport is a very common area because sport is very public, and after the game, they always rate the players. You got 7 out of 10, 9 out of 10, whatever. And in sport, they also say you're only as good as your last game. So you can play really well, just 1 bad game and you're hopeless. And so sport is a very common area, and it's also very competitive and very public. So it's common. Academia, very common as well, because we measure people all the way through academia. We give people grades, we stream them off into classes. And no matter how well you do, you still feel like an imposter because let's say you do well. You get a good grade and people say, oh, well done, you're so clever. And you feel good for a while, but now you think, now I have to do that all the time. What if I don't get a good grade? Now they'll realize that I'm not very clever after all. And if you don't do well, that just proves I can't do it. And so when you do well later on, that doesn't make sense. And so whichever way you can go, academia or the whole education system can build in that sort of doubts about yourself. As I said, when you get a promotion, when you get a promotion, part of you is delighted, this is great. And the other part of you is thinking, now I have to do the job. Will I be able to do it? And worse than that, at the interview, you told them you were a quick learner and how brilliant you were. And then you turn up on day 1 asking all these dumb questions and people go, where was the quick learner? You're supposed to be able to do this. And so that's when you get a promotion or something like that, part of you is delighted, but also part of you is thinking, maybe I've now reached my level. There's a nice model in business called the Peter Principle. And the idea there is that people rise or get promoted to the level of incompetence. And then they stay there. And you're wondering, maybe I've now reached my level of incompetence. Maybe this is the one where I can't go any further. And they'll suddenly realize I can't do it. Certainly any transition where you move from one area to another, that's really very common as well. Because let's say you're an expert in one type of architecture and then you move to another field and you don't know. And so suddenly you're thinking, now I was clever, but now I don't know that. A very common one in all fields really is, let's say you've done a really good job as an architect and then you get promoted to managing a team of people. And of course, you have no idea how to manage people. So you were really competent before, but now you're incompetent. You don't know how to do anything. So when you transit from one area to another. Other places where it's very common is if you're in a minority of some sort. If you're let's say the only woman in a group of all men, you're going to be thinking they're all looking at me. And if you are the only person in that place, not only are you representing yourself, you're representing half of humanity. And if you fail, well, oh, women can't do this or men can't do that and so forth. If you're the first in family to do something, first to family to go to university, first to do a higher degree, first to get a professional job, you think this doesn't make sense. And so that's a very common area where the first one to do anything is a very common area. So there's some. So I'll give you a few more and then we'll discuss it again. First of all, I did an interview on the ABC here in Adelaide a few years ago about the imposter syndrome. And it was a talkback thing. And this guy rang up and it had turned out he had represented Australia at the 1960 Olympics in Rome, and he was on the boxing team. But what had happened for the trials for those Olympics, he hadn't been selected. Someone else had been selected ahead of him. But just before the Olympics, the first guy got sick and couldn't go. And so he got promoted onto the team. But he said he spent the whole Olympics thinking, I shouldn't be here. Should have been the other person. And even if he'd won the gold medal, he'd been thinking it should have been the other person. And so that was because, despite him being the best person at the time, it should have been somebody else. That's when you apply for a job and you don't get selected, but then the person who they offered to doesn't accept it, and they accept you. Oh, well, they only picked me because the other person didn't want it. You know, maybe nobody else applied. I don't know if anybody here grew up in the UK, but they have a nice exam over there called the 11 plus exam. And that's where at the end of primary school they decide which secondary school or high school you go to. And I was working with a woman at my university. She was about 60 years old, everything going really well. She was doing a PhD. It was clear she was going to get it, but she said, no, it's never going to happen. It's going to go wrong. And I was asking her why not. And it had turned out she'd grown up in the UK and she had done the 11 plus exam and she had failed the 11 plus. And so despite all the evidence in between from now to then, her brain was, you can't do things. You are stupid, you can't do it. And that's how lessons you learn very early in life can go with you all the way through, despite all the evidence she had in between. As I said, public speaking is a very common area. In those pictures, you might notice the odd imposter over there as well. Research, which is where I work a lot, is very common because in research, you're doing new things, you don't know the answer, so it's a really common area. I don't know if there's any new parents listening in the group we have here, but you know, when you're expecting your first child, you read all those books, you know, what to expect when you're expecting and so forth. Unfortunately, the new baby hasn't read any of those books and it doesn't know how to behave properly. And so you're doing all the right things and the baby won't sleep all night or cries all day. And of course you think, I'm ruining this child's life. And not only that, but you look at all the other parents and they've got these bundles of joy and they go, oh, I'm ruining this child's life and so forth. So of course you're doing the best you can, but it's a very common one. And the last one on that example is, I ran this workshop at Harvard University a few years ago. Now you'd imagine at Harvard University, there wouldn't be any imposters there, eh? What do you think would be your first feeling if you turned up at Harvard University as a student next week or postgrad or whatever? You'd be looking around thinking, this is where all the clever people are. I shouldn't be here. And if the person beside you was just won the Nobel Prize or something, you're thinking, maybe I'm not going to show them my work and so forth. So in fact, I talked to some of the lecturers there and they said they choose their students from the top 10% of colleges around the US. And he said in the first week, 90% of those students have to work out they're not in the top 10% anymore. So they used to be in top, now they're still really clever, but surrounded by other really clever people. So they're very common. So the interesting thing about it is, it's an unusual thing. Here we have evidence. You're not an imposter, but you still feel like it. So what's that about? All of us think we're very good at looking at evidence. So there's two things about the imposter syndrome. The first one is, it's a secret. You can never check it out. Because if you were at a meeting and put up your hand and said, I think I'm the imposter, there's always the risk that they might say, yep, we were thinking the same thing ourselves. So you've got to keep a straight face and hope nobody finds out. You know, when you're having a meeting and someone explains something and they say, you understand that, don't you? And we'll go, oh, yes, I understand, even though you've no idea. And then you go out onto Google. And of course, all the other people, they look like they know, but they're nodding as well. And so everybody, it's a secret. That's why the understanding, so many people feel it. And the second thing is, it doesn't matter how much evidence you're not, you're still going to feel like it. That's what Jess was saying, you know, with a little bit more experience, you get more, but you still have that feeling. So that's weird because here you have evidence, but you don't look at it. So what do we do with the evidence? Well, what we do is called misattribute. We misattribute our evidence to something else. And so the kind of things, let's say something good happens to you, you get a compliment or whatever. We say, it was luck. I was lucky. Oh, you do a good job. Oh, I was lucky. I was in the right place at the right time. Nobody else must have applied, or it just turned out lucky today. Now, clearly luck plays a part, but it's not the only thing. You had to work hard as well. The other one is we think it was an easy job. Anybody could have done that, or there was nothing to it at all. It was straightforward, it was easy. The reality is, after the event, it looks easy. At the beginning, it wasn't easy, but we sort of think, oh, no, anybody could do that. No, anybody couldn't do that. We attribute our success to other people. Oh, it wasn't me, it was my supervisor, it was the team, it was all the people around me. And so we diffuse the responsibility, it was other people. So that's how we get rid of evidence. And the next one is, that was then, this is different. You know, I know I did well last year, but this is a completely different scenario. It doesn't apply at all. And the reality is, if you could do things well before, there's a chance you probably could do them well now. And the last one is really sneaky. And that's where we say, it was just because I worked so hard. I worked 10 times harder than everybody else. And that just proves how stupid I am, because if I was clever, I should have been able to do it easily. And that's an interesting one, because not only do you want perfection, you want perfection without effort. You should be able to sit down and with no effort, produce brilliant work. And of course, that's not realistic, but that's what we think, is other people seem to do that, but that's what we do. And so working hard becomes a disadvantage. It just proves you're inadequate, really. So I'm just going to give you a moment to type into the chat, what is your preferred way of getting rid of evidence you don't like? When somebody says something nice, or you get a compliment, or you win something, how do you diminish it? So let's see in the chat function, anybody got examples of how you do it? Just luck. Yep, absolutely. I was lucky. You're clearly a very lucky person. Worked hard and luck. Yeah. Vivian says attribute your success to other people. Minimize the job, but nothing really important. Yeah. It was really someone else's work. Yeah. I say thanks and then change the topic. Yeah. Had help from teammates. Yeah. Redirect the praise to other people. I actually now try and say thank you. Yes, it's hard. Yeah, that's good, Chantal. It was a team effort. And of course, the team does play a part, but you have to take your credit as well. I didn't think it was great. Yeah, it wasn't really anything special at all. Couldn't have done it without you guys. Yeah, and that sounds nice. They did the bulk of the work. Just part of the team, worked hard, attributed to other people. I'm not as good as everyone else, so you had to work hard, and that should be a badge of honor. But no, that just proves you're inadequate. Anybody could do it. Yeah, and so that the praise isn't genuine. They don't mean it anyway. They're just lying. Yeah, thanks, but it doesn't feel like that. Yeah. Give other people the credit, highlight things that went wrong. Yeah, you point out the gaps. Well, that could have been better, actually. Yeah, the we, not I. Praise others with too much enthusiasm. Yeah. So they're the ways we get rid of the evidence. All right. So what we're now going to do is talk about what you can do about it. Well, the people tend to respond in two ways. The first one is work hard, as I said, work super, super hard so that you don't get found out. And that's how you actually become quite successful. You work hard so things go well, but now you've got to keep working hard to keep that thing going. Or the other one, and the sad one, is people avoid things. This is when you don't put your hand up, you don't apply for the job, you don't take the risk. You're in a meeting and somebody says, and you have a question, but you don't feel confident enough to put up your hand because you're worried. And then someone else asks the question, think that was my question, and they get praised for it, and you hang on. So that's when it becomes a handicap, when you stop yourself putting your name forward and so forth along the way. At least if you work hard, you get things done, but avoiding means you miss out on opportunities. So what I'm now going to do is give you some strategies for dealing with it. What can you do about it? Now, I'm going to give you 10 different strategies. And I should have said they're going to give you some handouts after this with all this stuff written down in it. So you'll have a record of all these ideas I've got and the slides and whatnot. So I'm going to give you 10 and then see if you have any questions on that afterwards. But the 10 strategies, the first one is realize imposter feelings are normal. That you're not a freak or weird. This is normal. As I said, 70% more will feel like that occasionally. Most people will occasionally feel like an imposter, especially when you do something new. And for many of you who are fairly new in the whole profession, you're probably going to feel like it. That doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means it's normal. That's why it's good to know 148 other people feel like that as well. The second one is realize feelings are not facts. You can feel something, even really strongly, and it might not be true. So look at the evidence. You can feel like you're an imposter, but that does not mean it's true. You can feel like your work wasn't great, and people are still saying it's okay. What happens to me is I'll give a presentation, I think that didn't go so well, I didn't feel good about it, and people say it was fine. So feelings are important, but they are not facts. And so again, look at the facts. Number 3, you need to straighten out your thinking. And that means how you think about stuff, because we have these thinking patterns that aren't very helpful. And if we ran a longer workshop, I could talk about them. But really, use some what's called cognitive behavioral coaching to identify your assumptions and facts. Other people find it easy. Maybe they don't. I should be able to do things on the first day that people who have been here for 15 years can do. That's not very sensible. So you need to challenge some of those weird thoughts you have. Other people are brilliant, I'm stupid. Well, that's not really true. So you need to challenge those, and so straighten out your thinking. And when you find yourself having unhelpful thinking, do something about it. Number 4 is mind your language. This is how you talk. And in particular, when something goes well, when you get a compliment. And so for people say, oh, there's nothing, anyone. So don't discount your achievements. When somebody gives you a compliment, all you have to do is say, thank you. Don't go, it was nothing, anybody could do it, always the other people. No, just say thank you. When someone says, well done, thank you for that. And this is hard if you've never done it before, but learn how to do it, and you'll see nothing bad seems to happen. Because actually, when you say to somebody it was nothing, that's not really very fair. They've just said a nice thing to you, and you're throwing it back at them. But not only that, not only do they hear it, but you hear it as well, and you start to believe it. Maybe it was nothing. So just say thank you. Number 5, you need to create a fact file and a brag file. And a fact file is a file that contains evidence about your achievements. You know, when something good happens, when you get a good appraisal or a good compliment from a customer or whatever, what I do is I have a folder on my computer and all the good stuff goes in there. Because I run these workshops and every now and again, I'll get an email from somebody saying, that was crap. And if you have 100 nice things and one bad one, what do you focus in on? The one bad one. So when I get that one bad one, I go back to the 99 good ones and I go, that person's weird. They're wrong. And so you need a fact file or a brag file of all the nice things people have done and all their successes. And when you have an imposter feeling, go and look and say, hang on, here's all the good stuff. Number 6, you need to set objective standards. And that means don't move the goalposts after the event because people keep changing the rules. Or if I did that, I'd be happy. And then when it happens, no, I need something else. So you need to write down what is reasonable, what is the standard here. Number 7, gather evidence. Or do in psychology what are called behavioral experiments, means try it out and see. So try things out to see if your assumptions are accurate. Nobody would ever listen to me. Well, try it and see. My ideas are hopeless. Well, maybe try them out. Rather than assuming you know, check things out. Number 8 is know your imposter moments. I told you what they are already. When you speak in public, when you write things down, but definitely when you make a mistake, when something goes wrong, you know, if something fails or something doesn't go well or people challenge you, you're probably going to get overwhelmed by imposter feelings. That happens to me, and that's when you go, oh, that's the imposter feeling. It's not true. I feel like that, but hang on, it'll go away. So be prepared for those moments. Number 9, get used to your imposter feelings. As Jess said before, they don't go away, but you can get used to them. And that's when people say, does it ever go away? Can I take a tablet or something? No, you just get used to it. And people ask me, do you feel like an imposter? I've written the book about it. And I would say 5 times already in the last hour, will I get this right? Whatever. And you go, that's okay. It'll be fine. And so it doesn't go away, but you don't have to bother you so much. And the last one, and then we'll ask which is yours most useful for you, is be brave and take action. And that means you can learn all about this you like, but at some point, you just have to jump in and have a go. And I like this quote from a guy called Sidney Smith a long, long time ago. It says, a great deal of talent is lost to the world for want of a little courage. And I'm sure you know people, and certainly I know people who have great abilities and gifts, but don't take the risk. They don't put their hand up, they don't try, and so they miss out. And that's sad for them, but also for us, the rest of us, we all miss out on that person's gift. So at some point, you just have to jump in. So they're the 10. And so I might get you in a moment, or just think about which of these is most interesting for you. And again, you're going to hand out with these. Someone asked what's number 7, gather evidence, which means try things out. See, is it really true? So there's some strategies for dealing with it. And again, if you go to the website, there's more information and details on there. But for the last few minutes now, it's time for questions. And so I think Jess is probably going to handle the questions or take questions for you, or if someone prepared earlier. So Jessica, back to you.
Hi, thanks so much, Hugh. That was amazing. It's really great to have some actionable items there at the end. So we've got some questions that people submitted with their registration. I'll just run through them, and if people can start to put their questions in the chat so we can come to them in the next couple of minutes. Yep. So the first one is, what are your thoughts on staff evaluations / appraisal systems at work? For me, this triggers a month of imposter prior.
Yeah, like a staff evaluation or a review, that's just guaranteed to make you feel like an imposter, isn't it? Somebody's going to measure you. Your assumption is they're going to tell me I'm crap, I can't do it, because you're thinking about all the bad stuff. And we assume we know what's in their head. You know, they're going to have all these horrible things and so forth. And so it's really, really common. I said, anywhere you're going to be measured, it's likely to bring up those, because we're just not really good at knowing how do we fit, how am I going, and so forth. So I suppose the solution there, I think, is my view with staff appraisals and all those is there shouldn't really be any surprises. You shouldn't go to the meeting and suddenly find out you're crap. You know, somebody should have told you before, or maybe you should ask before, how am I going? And that means keep asking the question. And if you're wondering how am I going, go to your boss, your supervisor, and say, look, I'm just wondering, how do you think I'm going here? And hopefully they'll tell you, they'll say, fine, whatever. Or if you're not, and if you're genuinely worried but not, go and check that out as well. Because you're better off knowing it early rather than waiting and suddenly there's a big surprise. So my view is you're better off, because that's, again, you know, check out your assumptions. Go and see, is it okay? But also look at other people, how are you going? And so get a bit of a sense of where you fit. But, you know, staff appraisal, most people are going to feel anxious. Most people aren't going in thinking, yippee, this is going to be great. So I think it'll be fairly normal, but then look at the evidence. Actually, I have, and build up this is where your fact file will be really good. Look at all the things you have done rather than thinking about the one thing that went wrong. Think about the good stuff as well. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really great. And I don't know what you think about this, Hugh, but I have found that when my approach has sometimes I would just rather know if I'm doing something wrong or I need to fix something so I can fix it rather than not knowing and never getting better.
Well, I think that's right. I think the anticipation of it is worse than knowing. Actually getting bad news, at least then you can do something about it. It's that worry beforehand about the whole thing. So yeah. The other thing about you have to remember staff appraisals is these people on the other side are human too. Some of them are not very accurate. They'll be telling you not going well. They might be wrong. And so, that's where you match up what they're saying with what really seems to be happening. Yeah.
Yeah, great, thanks. So the second question is how to boost your confidence when you have the knowledge but you can't trust yourself.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. And so that means you have evidence, you got the knowledge, you can do it, but you're thinking, maybe I can't, maybe I can't. Basically, that's a little voice in your head going, you're crap, you can't do it, all the doubting questions. And I think what happens to all of us is you pay too much attention to that voice. And you think because it's questioning, it sort of brings up that fear response. And then you start thinking about all the other bad things and so forth. So that's, again, when I would think the fact file would be really helpful is, hang on, I actually have done things. Let's say someone comes to me and says, give a talk about something. Oh, maybe I can't do it. Well, hang on, I've done lots of things before. It seems to have worked before. It'll probably be okay this time as well. And that's when it's really helpful to have a fact file, because when you're having your imposter feeling, you can't think of all the good stuff. You can just think of all the bad things. So that's when you'd have a list and say, and it takes a while to change your brain about that. And so that's why you have to, when you're having that feeling, okay, I'm going to read that note. No, it says I'm okay, I can do this. And it basically you have to retrain your brain to look at things more accurately. And this isn't just positive thinking saying I'm brilliant. This is looking at the evidence. You have evidence, yeah.
That's such a good one. I think I'm definitely going to be starting a fact file.
Yeah, fact file, yeah. Every time I get good feedback, just open a folder on your computer, it goes in there, and then when you need it, go and have a look.
Fantastic. So our next question is, how can I build up the confidence of my colleagues suffering from imposter syndrome when I feel this way myself?
Yeah, you sort of feel like an imposter telling other people, don't feel like an imposter, even though you do yourself. And so the first thing I think is to talk, and what you're doing here is really good, is just talk openly about it. You have 130 people all having the same thing. And if you're talking to someone who you think feels it, just explain, yeah, I feel like that too. Isn't it weird? Let's have a chat about it. And suddenly everybody realizes. So I think the best way is just honest disclosure, not making yourself feel bad, but just say, look, it's pretty normal. And in fact, the way I'd put it is many high achievers feel like that. A lot of people at the top of their game are thinking that. So isn't that weird? And have a bit of a laugh about it. And then you minimize it. It's not such a big deal. A lot of people feel like that as well. Yeah.
Fantastic. And how to recognize when another person is experiencing imposter syndrome and subsequently how to reach out to them respectfully.
Yeah, well, first of all, my general assumption is everybody is feeling like an imposter. So you don't have to try and look at them. You don't have to look and see if they've got a sign on their brain or a sign on their head or something like that. My working assumption is everybody's feeling like it a bit. It's a fairly normal thing. And then the way I would reach out to people is, first of all, self-disclose and say, I was doing this thing and I was wondering, could I do it? I had a bit of doubt, but hang on, I had a bit of a laugh and I realized. And by disclosing that, you give other people permission to talk about it as well. And again, if people don't want to admit it, you can't make them do it. You can't sort of force them to do it. So what you can do is build a bit of trust. And ideally in your workplace or in your group, it would be good to have a trusting environment where people are allowed to say, I feel like that, or make mistakes. Some environments are like that. Some are very hostile to that, where making a mistake is very bad, in which case it's not very sensible to be revealing yourself. You have to be sensible about this. If you have a bunch of bullies around you and you say, I feel like a fraud, and they all start picking on you, that's not going to go well. So you've got to be aware of the environment you work in. But hopefully, if you're in a nice, good environment, you can sort of build that out. Yeah.
Yeah, great. So what are some daily rituals that you would recommend for someone who has the imposter syndrome?
Yeah, so like the way I view it from a psychology point, remember this is just one perspective on the world, but from a psychology point of view, these are thoughts in your brain, and patterns of thinking that you've developed over a long period of lifetime. And but the good news is, from a psychology point of view, you can change the way you think, but it takes a bit of effort. You've got to work on that. And that means the first one is recognizing your assumptions. You're telling yourself, I can't do it. And notice the way we said before, where you attribute success to other people. Oh, it was the other people. And notice when you do that and go, hang on, That's not very sensible. That means I don't get credit. So you have to, first of all, become aware of the techniques, and I showed you how we sort of do it, and then change that. And that means, as I said, when someone gives you a compliment, you have to go, thank you. That would be a daily ritual anybody could do. When something good happens, another one that's hard for a lot of people is when something good happens, tell people about it rather than keep it to yourself and don't do it. Is actually go out and say, great day today, I just did really well on that thing. And that's hard, but it's important to slowly change that as well. But the other daily ritual, I suppose, just being aware you're thinking and then slowly changing it.
Yeah, great. I guess as a follow-up to that, this is just my question. I was wondering if you have any comments on mantras or things like that. I sort of positive self-talk, I guess.
Yeah. There's a lovely concept. I just mentioned something that comes up as well. There's a lovely concept in psychology called the Dunning-Kruger effect. And the Dunning-Kruger effect broadly says is that the less people know about things, the more confident they become. And the more they know, the less confident they are. Which means people who know nothing about anything are adamant about it. And people who are more experienced actually become less confident because you're thinking it's really complicated. And so that means that the fact that you doubt yourself does not mean you can't do it. It just means you're aware of all the difficulties and all that along the way. So that's one. But the other one that you sort of talked about there, just a slide I have about that is you'll often hear fake it till you make it. And sort of people encourage you to do that. And I'm not a big fan of that phrase because what it's basically saying, for two reasons. One, it's telling you fake it, which I don't think is great advice. Pretend you can do things even when you don't. And if I was going in for brain surgery, I would like the surgeon to know what they were doing, not just make it up as I go along. You can do it. But the second one, it says until you make it, which implies you're going to get there. And of course, if you faked it, when you get there, you're going to think, I've been faking. And so now you've got to fake more and more. So it just perpetuates it. So the daily ritual I would have is be brave and take action, which means when you're sitting there at a meeting wondering, maybe I should ask the question, put up your hand and ask the question. So be a bit brave. It's a bit scary, but take that little step and then move out there. It's the sort of same thing as fake. It means try it out, but it's not that model of just pretend it's all going cool for you. So be brave and take action. And just even admitting, I don't know the answer to this, but I thought I'd ask anyway. And so be brave and take action.
Yeah, fantastic. So the next question is, I feel imposter syndrome when I'm applying for jobs, as if I'm lying or not good enough. How do I get past this feeling?
Yeah, it's really common because in the application you've got to write all this good stuff about yourself, how brilliant you are and so forth. And that's where I think there's that balance between presenting yourself well versus going over the top and saying you can do things you can't do. So my view is look at the evidence, claim what you can do and factual evidence, but don't go beyond that. And so, yeah, I can do these things. The other one is if you find it really hard to write a biography or an application is get the facts together and then show it to one of your friends. And one of your friends will say, hang on, you haven't said all the good stuff in here. So find a good friend who you trust and they will add in, hang on, you're better than that. And so they can help you deal with some of those things where we tend to minimize ourselves. A good friend will go, no, hang on, you can do better than that. And so I would say showing it to other people or colleagues or supervisors who are on your side as well.
Yeah, fantastic. So we've got a couple more questions that have just been submitted. Anushka has said, if imposter syndrome is so prevalent, if there is a way to admit it to others, is there a way to admit it to others to clear the air and create a space for understanding with colleagues or superiors, for example?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, my advice is talk about it. So what you could do when you go into work tomorrow is say, I went to this webinar thing last night where this guy was talking about the imposter syndrome. And he said, most people have it. And just see how people respond. And if they all go, that's rubbish, you're weird, maybe stop talking. If they go, yeah, I understand the same thing, well, then you might have a bit more about it and then you might raise it like that. So that's the way I think, is to talk to people about it and see how their reaction. And if they sort of freeze up, it's not safe, but more than likely, hopefully they will. And that's why it's really important as well for senior colleagues and partners or whatever to admit it. Because if they admit it, people go, hang on, it's okay to do that. Yeah. So that'd be my view, is talk about it gently, but take baby steps and see how the reaction is. Yeah,
that's great advice. So Jessie has said, how do I deal with the seemingly unending amount of rejected applications? I know I'll get there eventually, but it's hard.
Yeah, look, nobody is going to be excited when you get rejected. It's not nice, and you're going to feel bad. But then that's when, first of all, feel bad, go away and have a gin and tonic or a hot bath or something like that. And then when you calm down a bit, go, hang on, that goes another on the rejection file. However, I know that most people have to apply for 10 jobs or 20 jobs. This is just me going through. It's not just me, it's everybody else as well. It's fairly normal. And it's not nice, but you have to realize that's part of the process. And so my view is when you put in the application, you're probably going to go, there's a good chance they'll get rejected. So when the letter comes, you don't feel so bad. You go, it's probably going to happen, but that's okay. I'll keep going. And that's when you have to have the faith is everybody goes through this and so forth. So yeah, so look, it's not nice. And that's what, but be prepared for that. And be prepared. You'll feel bad, but don't go, that means I'm crap. And that means, no, it's not nice, but I'm going to do something nice tonight. I'm going to go and have a nice meal, and then we'll deal with it again. So rather than believe that fact, go and look at the evidence. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. So there's, that's all the questions. There's some really interesting conversation happening in the chat at the moment with people offering some advice and support just there. So I think that's really valuable conversation about how people are dealing with that question of unsuccessful job applications. So that's the end of the questions. Is there anything else you would like to talk about for the
So my view is, first of all, I suppose I'd leave you with that comment on the screen, is be brave and take action and realize, and the saddest thing about the whole lot of it is it stops people achieving their potential. You could take a risk, you could apply for a job, you could put your hand up, and I would say be brave and have a go. And the worst that'll happen is people will say it's wrong, and you go, okay, thanks, I'll put that in the list and I'll go on to the next one. So, tomorrow or the next day, be brave and take action and have a go at it. So that's all for me. Yeah, I'm going to leave it there.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Hugh. This has been such a valuable session, and I certainly have gotten a lot out of it personally, and I'm sure everyone has as well. I'd like to thank everyone for joining tonight and interacting so positively in the chat. It's been really great to see, and we really appreciate it. I'd like to thank EmAGN and SONA for the support with getting this together, and the Institute, particularly Maddie, who helped pull this session together. Hugh has shared some further resources, which Maddie has shared in the chat room, so you might just need to scroll back to find those. And please join us for our next Lean-In session on Wednesday, the 9th of September at 6 p.m. for a discussion about practicing inclusively. The importance of equity, diversity, and inclusion within architectural practice and design processes have been well documented to ensure that our offices and design cultures reflect the communities we serve. What work do we need to individually do to ensure that we can encourage equitable and inclusive processes over the course of our careers? This Lean-In panel discussion will cover how to work towards a more intersectional inclusive practice. More info on that talk and our speakers can be accessed by the link that I believe Maddie is sharing. Thank you, everyone. This has been...
Jessica, there's a comment there that says, Jess, you're a great presenter, really warm and natural. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
That's all you have to do, say thank you.
This has been such a good session, and I'm so pleased with how it's turned out. So thank you all very much.